Okay, can you guys hear me? Can you see me? Say yes in there in the chat. It's lovely to have all of you. For those of you who have only worked with me and haven't worked with Gary Springfield, I'd like to introduce you to my very first mastery student. I've had a number since, but none has taken me to such heights in readings as his. He only because he spent, before I met him in 2014, I think, or maybe it was before 2014.
February 2014.
He'd already spent 35 years in teaching meditation, golden light meditation. So he was already equipped with a great deal of spiritual elevation. So when I tuned into his soul, it took me to a whole new layer, a whole new level. And then he also became my meditation teacher, which is very difficult to teach me meditation. But I did acquire some skills from this guy. And I do hope, this is my first Source Talk back from spine surgery. I've been out a year, and I drove 3 days to come spend this time with Gary Springfield, because the 30 or 40 readings we've done have all been transcribed thanks to a student of Gary's, Ed Ferrero. Sorry, Ed, it's difficult. Names are difficult when I start to prepare to go into a Source Talk. And that's eventually going to be a book. I am excited for that because the information is super profound and deep. Gary, is there anything you want to say before we go into the Source Talk?
When I met Sandra, of course, I had been meditating for many, many years with great discipline and teaching all over the United States. And I had a great awareness, a great deal of light and knowledge. But then when I met her, the information that came through her from Source and from the Galactic Federation, which you'll probably talk a little bit about, was beyond profound and deep. It's some of the great mystery school teachings that are being relivened from Egypt, from the Essene schools, even from civilizations before that. So it's very profound, and the book is going to be quite spectacular. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. Well, without further ado, then, just because I'm not that interesting, but Source is very interesting to listen to. And again, I want to thank you all for coming, and thank you for putting up with the tech glitches. They stress me out tremendously. So I've actually enjoyed having a full year off and not having to suffer from the tech glitches that go on when I do Source Talks and the knowing and the being and so forth. But we are going to be hopefully moving back into that work, slowly ramping up to doing more of the knowing and the being. Tonight's talk, we've only been told a little bit that it is to discuss the Christ field meditation system. But I, as you all know, if you've been to my Source Talks before, I really don't know anything about what Source is going to say. I just have to tune in when I arrive, and then we all wind up in the same place at the end. I don't know if there'll be time for questions, but just in case, you might consider dropping a question in the chat, and we'll see if we can get to one or two of them before the night's over. And thanks again for joining us. Just give me a moment to tune my resources. Having Gary Springfield here makes that fast, a lot faster and a lot deeper. So just give me a moment to get started. So God says, in the foundation of the work that we do with most of you that are here, there is a shining light that we see when we are doing your soul readings with Sandra. And that shining light for some is just a pinpoint of light. For others, it's a glowing, pulsating orb. For others, it's a halo overhead. And then for people like Gary Springfield, that light is an illuminance that, when mastered, becomes part of the world that you walk in. So you walk through the orb that you are within when the Christ field is illuminating to be true. Illuminating what is true in the Christ field is a centering, and it centers the condition. So all conditions within this three-dimensional plane are conditioned by matter, material, which means that you hit up against it when the wave is not equal to your interior view. When you are, for example, having a bad day, and the wave that is coming toward you lightens that day, it's because your interior view is suddenly reflecting the greater you. It's not because something necessarily good has happened, because you've had things good happen to you before that you didn't register as good at the time. You registered as, oh no, not again, or oh no, not that guy, or oh, not her, she's always bad news. But whatever came from that condition that you've registered as a bad thing, that you later realize is a good thing, is because the interior view changed. What can I do with this? How can I experience this in a way that is good for me? Forgiving. How is it forgiving as it gives to me? And even in that state of forgiving, because it's giving to you, there's an interior view that has changed. And the interior view that has changed into the condition that makes for good, good for you and good to you, is the Christ field. Now, that is rarely described as a field, the idea of a Christ as a field. So let's review what the Christ is. The Christ is an illumination in the void, and it began at the time of God being conscious of what God is. God had a sudden awareness of what God is, reflecting back to God, what is God? And in that reflection became an explosion of self-love. And in that self-love became a creating. All that created from that center of self-love was a reflection of what God already was, just not organized in any way. It's disorganized. Disorganization is different than unorganized. Unorganized is chaotic. Disorganized is potential. It means there is a condition that has been brought into disassembly. It's possible that God was once assembled, and then only through awareness that it was disorganized, that it was reorganized into something creative, that created and became the creator. This is replicated in every cell of the universe. It seeks its own organization. It seeks what it is that is organized into an organism with organs that are partial to a whole. The partial to a whole, when organized, becomes love. The partial to a whole that becomes organized is love. And it is identified in love. And it identifies what is love. And it's self-aware of self that is love, that loves the self. And this is a field, creates a field, and it emanates from the organism that loves. Now, love in this case is not romantic. It is not always forgiving, because sometimes it will kill to preserve. And often this is the way God creates. God creates in a manner where that which is dying needs saving. And that which is dying that needs saving may need killing of that which is killing what needs saving. So what that means when it comes to identifying the Christ field within is that when a part of you that is having a really bad day is killing you, it's killing off the true you, because you're organizing your interior view on something outside of you, which disorganizes you. So to organize you would mean to identify what's killing you and to create the destruction of what's killing you. So a field then that comes from the eminent you, the Christ within, is a love that is self-rewarding. And as it self-rewards, it emanates out and rewards everything you do, everything you are, with what you are. But it's fragile. It's very fragile, which is why a meditation system on the Christ field is extremely important when you care about maintaining self-love. So self-love in a maintenance, we want to give people an opportunity to address this in the comments. What do you think self-love is when there is nothing in your world reflecting love? What is self-love when nothing in the world is reflecting love? Put your answers in the chat and let's see what people think. Do you have an idea, Gary? Do you want to add to the...
Well, it would be honoring the deepest heart feeling inside, the internal deep awareness of that which I am, that I cherish.
So self-love, when the world is not reflecting love, is cherishing the self?
100%. Cherishing, adoring, upholding.
Ashley says, a reflection of the interior. Pamela Knight says, surrender to the awareness. Self-love is a surrender to the awareness. It's an interesting answer. Anna thinks that it's God. Self-love is God. And I think that's Eric. And Eric says, It is recalling who I truly am. So these are all references to the self-identity. I cherish what I am. Seeking that awareness of what I am when the world is cold and dark and unforgiving, when it says things that are cruel and hurtful and meaningless. The identity that is self-love, that is seeking itself, is holding the identity separate from the exterior experience. A force to bring you within. Self-love is a force to bring you within. God says the force is awareness. So awareness has to be conscious in order for awareness to be a force. It's a force of view. And the force of view that is interior to is a force field away from the exterior. So the field that is created from self-love is the buffer between the exterior experience and the interior view. But how does one get there? We now have established what it is. How does one get there when the exterior view is bombarding and blocking the interior view? How do we get there?
I do it by feeling that sunlit glory within my inner being around the area of my heart. There's a glow there that exists now from over many years of learning about self love, that I no longer look for validation in the world, and has created this sunlit glow within that is God I am, that I love so dearly.
So seeking validation from the external world then would block that connection to self-love. And Gary's way of removing that block is to not seek external validation. That validation comes from one's awareness that one is perfect, a perfect child of God. That's Gary's way. So what are some other ways? Persistence, trust, and faith, awareness of perception, listening to self, peace of beingness within. Denise says something very interesting here. She says, being in complete bliss in the eternal now, not needing, but being. Not needing, but being. This is a how, but it requires awareness of that state. When someone says something to you, though, that is a bombardment of untrue, it is untrue that what you said meant what they think you meant. And then they attack you. They've taken your words, they've twisted them in a way that there's not only an internal offense, but a knife. You've had to go into a place of looking at those words that they said from their perspective, right? In order to get to bliss, you have to not see the untrue that they've now put inside you. And you have to see what is true. So that's the first step in the how of getting to self-love when the world outside does not reflect love. when the world outside does not reflect love, the way to get to love is to seek what is true. Because the untrue can disguise itself as true when someone whose opinion you care about says something about you. And even if you don't care about them, you just know that their opinion is somehow important. The untrue is a condition that stains and it collapses the field that comes from self-love. It literally collapses the field so that the outside comes in. So seeking what is true is looking at what got stuck in you. Sometimes that means pulling the knife out. So Gary, how would you describe a knife when someone says something that is an expression of their belief of what they think about you, and it comes in as a knife? What's the knife?
It's a great pain that one is experiencing inside emotionally because it is hitting something inside that is not yet loved by the great being you are, I am. And so it re-enlivens that wound that for me was always something from childhood that reflected often a past life experience that I had not yet learned to love or to forgive. And so the knife then hit that. And if I blamed them, then I was not really looking at what was inside of me that wanted to be loved. So I then learned how to find the emotion, go beneath it, and then love that part of me somewhere in the physical body that wasn't loved.
So the question was, what's the knife? And the knife sometimes does, as Gary described, has a whole history written on it. It may not be what plunged it, but it is what felt it. It's written, there's a whole history. And in some cases, it is past life history. Some cases, it is childhood history. In other cases, it's heartbreak that came from disappointment. And then those disappointments get written. Oh no, not again. Oh no, not again. Sometimes that's what's written on the knife. Let's see what others are saying. The knife is the delusion. In a way, the knife is that construction of delusion, deluded. The truth was something other. And the truth that is something other becomes diluted because you believed. Maybe you believed a certain individual was going to be there for you and they weren't. And that gave you the knife. Oh no, not again. Or maybe they made a promise they didn't uphold. And that's the knife. Or someone you trusted who cares about you, or you thought they cared about you. And then they went and did and said something that showed they didn't. There's the knife. Jennifer says, the typical self-identification dissolves and the Christ field perception supersedes. I think that was answer to another question about the knife. Other than the knife. Dawn says that the knife is the awareness. And unfortunately, that's not true. The knife is complete blindness, unaware of the origin of the pain, unaware of what is really true because it becomes the untrue. Someone is untrue to you, there's the knife. The words they spoke are untrue to you, there's the knife. Suddenly you become untrue to yourself and the knife remains. It's not until you seek what is true and you reaffirm what is true that the knife starts to slowly back out. And in the origin of what that pain is, awareness can sometimes be read, but it's never awareness of the origin of the pain. It's always awareness of what is true. Because when you rehash the untrue, not only does the knife remain, but it twists and it confounds and it confuses because it's not true. It can't be true. How can that be true? It's not true me. They didn't perceive me right. I thought they loved me. I thought they knew me. I thought they knew better of me. So the untrue becomes this fixation that is that knife. But seeking what is true starts to look at that knife. And the first seeking of what is true is what is true to you. Not meaning, we don't mean that what is true to you is true for you, but not others. And you accept suddenly that, well, that may be true for them, but it's not true for me. That will not pull the knife out. What pulls the knife out is what is true. And true that is in this way true is true forever. And the only one who invaded that true was one who was untrue, untrue to you, disloyal, undeserving. So how the Christ field is related to what is true is that it is impenetrable to the untrue. It cannot be penetrated by the untrue. So whenever the untrue has come to you, in a thought, in a day, in a sadness, whenever the untrue comes to you, you cannot emanate that Christ field. Truth has to be found first. And when truth is found, and the Christ field then has a heart to work in, because the feeling of the knife, what makes that literal feeling of a knife, is that the heart shuts down. It's protecting itself from the untrue, so it closes up. And that's the feeling of heartbreak, heartache, and the knife. The heart shuts down. Because in protection, and that's its own way to protect, although it doesn't protect, it only repeats the injury over and over again. And the only thing that can reopen the heart is remembering what is true. Now, we are aware of a communication that came in which a former student accused Sandra and Gary of egos, great egos. And she said in an email in response to the invitation all the things as to why she no longer engages in their work, because they have big egos. And Sandra and Gary are not wise enough to notice those who would think such things. They are joyfully ignorant because self-love is required in the spiritual work. You cannot go deep enough down to hear another voice, to experience another experience from your external experience and have some big aggrandizing ego. What appears to be ego is self-love. Loving oneself enough to not care what others think, to not care whether they engage or don't engage, and to express the highest of oneself is self-love. And it's perceived by those who don't contain self-love, if in a moment, who don't perceive their own self-love, when others are experiencing their self-love and just being themselves no matter what, they perceive that as ego. Oh, look at me. Oh, look at me. Aren't I great? Aren't I fabulous? Yes, you are. Yes, you are. And that's what you have to remember when the heart shuts down from what is untrue. Because what is true is how brilliant and fantastic you are. The field that buffers you from the outside world is ignorant to how the outside would perceive you as untrue. So to create the Christ field in Christianity, there is a master who ascended in the time. This is Sandra saying, forgive me a minute. They're giving me pictures I'm enjoying. I just have to describe them. I see a sandstorm in a desert, and a man, a figure I can only imagine must be Jesus in this sandstorm. God says the sand represents the cuts of the external world. The sand of the desert represents that which would eat you alive. And what emerges in these tiny cuts is a man who ascended to such a degree that each and every individual who would call upon him can receive him. It is why the story of Christianity is receiving Jesus as your Lord and Savior, because you can call upon this being to save you in moments of despair, heartache, heartbreak, untrue, what is untrue. But those of you who have yet to identify Jesus as some figure in a sandstorm can reemerge themselves into a Christ field and maybe one day meet this being. But to introduce yourself to the field of the Christ, you have to let go of your perceptions of what the Christ is and allow it to emerge in the sandstorm. Allow it to be among the self. Among the self. So we're going to take this now to a different direction and start to define what the self is. The self is not the mind, but it is the mind. The self is not the heart, but it is the heart. The self is not the body, but it is the body. The self is not the spirit, but it is the spirit. The self is not the soul, but it is the soul. Now, this is a riddle. So those of you who are good at riddles, tell us what you think that riddle means.
Sources everywhere, within everything, and nowhere simultaneously.
No. I mean, not that that's not true. It is true. But that is not the answer to the riddle.
Good. It's my answer.
It's your answer. It's a good one. Let's see. It's also perceived as selfishness. Yes, Ashley. I agree. Anyone want to try? Here we go. Here's some answers. Everything and nothing. All at the same time. We aren't just a drop in the ocean. We are also the ocean in the drop. Ooh, that is good. Who said that? Angel. Very good. Life force energy. Is it describing like the self exists in multiple dimensions and realities? That's the closest really to what we're getting at. But the answer is the self is that which you are, you do not know. So if you know your own mind, then that part's taken care of the self. If you know your soul, that part's taken care of. If you know your heart, so on and so on. But the self is the condition within you you do not know, because you cannot be both the self and know it at the same time. So the self will separate from itself in order to look at itself. So on one day it may look at its soul. On another day it may look at its heart. On another day it may look at its mind. But the soul and the spirit are uniting in the self. You can't separate in your own mind knowing the soul and not know the spirit. But the soul that is also spirit, that holds the self looking at it, what self is that? What self is separating from itself to look at the soul and the spirit, to identify them? What self is that? Anyone want to try?
God or source?
No. This is Sandra saying, is it mind? No. What self separates from the self to see the soul and spirit? A self at an adjacent fractal layer of reality? That's a good answer. Is that the right answer, God? No, it's not wrong, but it's not the answer we're looking for. Consciousness. Very good, Denise. Consciousness. And consciousness is multi-dimensional. So if the condition of consciousness is looking at itself, then it must be some identity above and beyond itself. It must be somehow beyond itself. God, is it contained within itself? Is all contained within its consciousness? No. There is no containing of consciousness. There is only identity of consciousness. And every identity of consciousness that you are becomes a new level of you understand when you bring consciousness to that dimension of what you are. Some people have raised their consciousness to such a degree that their consciousness travels, either in their sleep or out of body, or in psychic visions. When Sandra is in her recovery day after Thursday readings, she has a struggle to hold her consciousness steady because it's broken up in the condition of her body, and in the psychic realm where she's viewing other consciousness, other souls. It's all broken up into all their souls. So until those souls are slowly seeped out of her consciousness, she struggles to hold herself together because the body is its own condition, separate from her consciousness. And it takes 32 hours to return that consciousness to that body so that the body can start functioning again and not feel like it is somehow separate from its consciousness. Now, those who have attended Gary's workshops and meditations and have achieved higher levels of consciousness in those meditations, they have the same struggle. They take a full 24 hours to return to their physicality because their consciousness is hovering in some system and they can't perform functions like type out emails or make phone calls or remember people's names or how to do their jobs. So they have to organize their time in order to perform a change of consciousness in a meditation with Gary Springfield. Gary Springfield, as a teacher of meditation, is not as powerful as Gary Springfield as a presence in meditation. And his students who've been with him many years know that presence and sit and meditation at the same time during meditations in order to receive that consciousness, the presence of the spring field. Because he's architected as a Christ child, one who is born under the star that is the Christ, born of the Christ. And it's a job to be a Christ child, and not all born as a Christ child fulfill their job. It's too uncanny, too weird, and in some cases it feels heretical to call oneself a Christ child, to experience oneself as a Christ child. So many of them then go deep into religion, Christianity, because that's the only way they can experience in a dogma the heightened experience of their religiosity, the condition of the Christ within them, the architecture of the crystalline light that came from the void, that put into their physical body a self that is aligned with a higher vibration. And that higher vibration of its highest form takes the individual consciousness into a full awareness. And there's nothing but Christianity that describes that. But one need not be immersed in religiosity of Christianity to experience it. But once one experiences it, one understands the religiosity of Christianity. And all that once seemed untrue or a myth has some element of truth. For some reason, the new perspective or the new view of oneself identifies a new consciousness, the self-consciousness that is a Christed state. And when we do this in the center of Sandra, we're referring to a formulation of a center. It is a formulated center. So when one centers oneself, what does that mean? Give us some answers there in the comments. When one centers oneself, what does that mean? Got some ideas?
Well, it's a profound feeling of love for all creation and I feel it's centered within the heart area, and from there it creates a radiance outwardly. So it's being within internal radiance, a sphere of radiance.
We can't argue that that's your experience, because if that's your experience, then it's true. But we would say it differently. A balance of positive and negative, a neutral, Denise says, a neutral. That is a clarity of what gives you center. And we think that's fascinating, that one experiences a neutral space, no judgment, not judging whether something is good or bad, positive or negative. The zero space of neutrality is a center for Denise. We like that. For New Being, the individual who calls themselves New Being, God, I love the sound of that. Their YouTube profile is New Being.
Oh, that's very good.
I love
Hi,
that.
New Being.
Hi, New Being. And for New Being, it's grounding. In a way, centering oneself, or the center of oneself, is grounded, firmly grounded. It's not up in here in the head space, thinking. It's not flying in the ethers, in daydreams. It is holding a space at ground, firm to the ground. Anyone else want to say what is the condition? Oh, Mer, hi Mer. For her, it is in true form, equilibrium. Nice, Ashley, equilibrium. Angel says, tapping in the source energy. God says, centering oneself is the tap. It is not the tapping, it's the tap. So just tapping a keg, in order for that beer to flow, that tap is the mechanism that pierces the container. So source energy is contained within the grounded state, within the centered way. So what taps it to allow it to flow, for centering to flow? Because it does have a kinetic experience. One feels the kinetic experience of centered. Release of attachment to all sources of stress. Absolutely. All sources of stress, the attachments are released. 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 Neutral space. No judgment. But our answer to what is center is origin. Coming to origin. What is original, that is you. It is the space that is you that was born. It is the new born self. And it can be newly born in every thought that ages you. The aging process in a body is all related to thought. Every thought is recorded in the body. It's recorded in the face, in the way you stand, the way you slump, the way you hurt. So when you come to center, to what is origin, suddenly pain is gone, age is gone. And if you hold yourself in that space for an hour, you emerge out of that space young looking, your eyes glowing, your skin radiant, your being vibrating. That center space is also the place where hearing voices, namely the voice of God within you, it is that space one must return to in order to hear the voice of God. And so many who are capable of hearing that voice, who hear it by accident, maybe in moments of despair, God breaks through and you hear that voice. The only space to receive that voice is in neutral, non-judgment. Was that just my imagination? Now you're judging that thought. Oh, that was just my imagination. Oh, that's just me thinking. As if to say that you thinking couldn't be God speaking. When you are in center and you are in holding of center, the space that is a temple. So you build that temple in order to receive what you are that is source communicating. So remember when we said, what is the self that pulls away from the soul and the spirit to look at the soul and the spirit? And the answer was consciousness. Well, that consciousness is contained in an identity, but that identity is contained in a greater identity. And when holding that consciousness separate from thought, looking into the space that is spirit and soul, and receiving what is that condition of joy in center, no thought, that is receiving the brain wave without thought. The brain can wave without thought. That is impression. Psychic impression will impress upon the image maker in the brain and produce imagery. Or for some, it will press on the condition of auditory and produce sound. For others, it might be pure knowing, no pictures, no sound, just knowing. And that knowing can come in such an instant that it can break open and unpack over an entire week before fully understanding what that knowing meant. But it can only come at the temple. And the temple that is within that center can also illuminate when it is in the light of spirit. So we don't want anyone to give away the answer, the Christ. We want you to think language, more language, to then not just the Christ and how we've defined it. But go into your center and see it as a temple. And let that temple reveal itself. So just let's take 5 minutes right now and go to your center and let your temple reveal itself. We're just going to do it at 5 minutes. So we are going to interrupt you. And we did this on purpose because this is the world outside. The world outside of you is always interrupting what's going on inside you. When you try to meditate, when you try to hold yourself steady, when you try to be in the center, it's going to be interrupted. So those of you who had an experience with a temple that emerged, type in what you saw in your mind's eye or what you felt, what the experience of that temple was. And type in if you didn't see anything. Nuance. Interesting. So New Being said nuance. Do you mean you had pure potential? I saw a coiling serpent. Fascinating. Denise's brain felt like it expanded and scared me. Oh, Denise, very interesting. Didn't see, felt. Mary felt. Knowing. Teresa saw an ocean. Your temple is an ocean? Wow. Cloudiness. Pamela, interesting. Felt warm and the golden light. Good, Angel. Annalisa, I experienced a moment in my inner sanctuary, a waterfall. Very, very good. Annalisa, very good. Not that the others did not have what we were looking for. It's that the time was too short for you to find your temple. You were finding yourself, experiencing yourself, and a knowing of yourself. But a true temple literally is a place within you where you meet God and you go to in order for God to go to you. Because in the beginning, when you're first learning your dialogue of inner, it's to be assembled. So the ocean isn't an assembling of a temple, although it is a space within Teresa where she feels power. The power, the surge, broader imagery of an ocean. And the nuance, the new being experienced was just presence. There was a presence. So new being, the only thing next now is to assemble the temple. For some people, the temple was already assembled before birth. And the soul has a knowing of what that looks like. And over time, it can evolve, but it's pretty much assembled the same way. For some, for instance, Sandra just saw her temple for the first time in a long time. But what had changed is that a fire emerged in the center of that temple that wasn't there before. She used to go there in her solitude before she had other mechanisms to alert us that she was ready to receive. She would go to this temple. So we suggest for each one of you to build a temple in your center. And in that center where the temple is, go to it and request presence of source that is going to communicate with you in some way. We suggest it be something you have to walk up to, walk the steps of. Because when you walk the steps to your temple, each step is a presence of you getting closer to the presence of God. Nothing is wrong with what you've said or what you experienced. This is just our suggestion for going deeper into your dialogue with Source. Now, we're going to end this in a minute, so we want to make sure that there are questions that we can answer. So just throw in or out. God says, Gary, what would you describe if someone asked you, what is your experience of the Christ? What would you describe?
It's a feeling of sunlit radiance that's very palatable and emanating from around. And as I hang, and because I've taught my mind to be perfectly silent and focused, it's just as we did that and went to the temple, I immediately went to the very center of where the Christ is a radiant field around me. And then I just hung in the eternal expansion of the void. And I know that in the void, all that is the mind of God exists in all possibilities. And so as I hang there, I can then take the illumination of the Christ and focus it on a specific form, idea, feeling within the void, and it will arise forth from out of the void into expression. But it's a sunlit radiance that grows every day as I do my meditation and practice being with Source and the God I am within.
You triggered a hot flash. See, my face is getting all red. When Gary describes his experiences, Sandra's saying when he describes his experiences, it tends to either make my eyes bug out or my body go into a hot flash. So, all right. Let's see. Is anyone got some questions? I see a question mark. Should we expect the temple to reveal itself, or are we to imagine what it is to be? Very good question. God says there are true ways to assemble a temple, and there are untrue ways to assemble a temple. The untrue way is to pull from your imagination the building blocks for that temple. That is assuming the temple doesn't already exist. So you've got to build it. But you were born on a temple. You were born, and all of spirit rejoiced that you made it. You made it into the three-dimensional construct, and they rejoiced at the temple. You already have, you already are. So the true way to assemble it is to hang in the balance of your consciousness. So it's a balance state. It's a balanced state. And in the imagination, flashes of its construction starts to come. But the allowing of those flashes to come are a construction of the imagination. The imagination nuances before it allows. So it can experience the feeling on the verge of, And if you believe in those nuances, that those nuances guide you to what is true, because they're so subtle. Maybe you might experience a lacquer floor. You can't see the lacquer floor in your imagination yet, but something about the nuance of a lacquered wooden floor over a marble floor or stone floor or a concrete floor. There's a nuance of the softness of wood, a nuance of the slickness of lacquer, a nuance of the sound that of silence echoing off a wooden floor that sounds very different from echoing off a stone floor or stone walls. And maybe you might experience the feeling, the nuance of fabric. It feels like in my temple, there's fabric. And maybe it feels like it could be silk. Or maybe merino wool or sheepskin. Allowing the nothing to emerge as a something means beginning with the nothing, believing in the something. And sometimes believing in the something requires your imagination, but it is not a construction of the materials because the temple already exists. You already made that construction before you were born. Good question. Cool answer. That was Sandra saying God had a cool answer, not Sandra had a cool answer. Just reassuring there.
It's that ego.
It's that ego gets in the way. I want people to know that God has far more. I mean, sometimes I look at my source talks and I think, oh, people must think I'm just something I'm not. I'm really just a shy
Farm girl
from Kansas. I'm just a shy girl from Kansas, an artist and
with golden slippers
with
and a little dog named Toto.
I wish I had a little dog.
We'll get you one for Christmas.
Oh no. Let's see. I drew my temple. I heard the penetration in Greece. The Pentagon in Greece. Interesting. Sandra is a cool cat. Thanks, Teresa Day. So any more questions? We're at 7:11 our time. That is a good set of numbers. Now, I want everyone to know who maybe don't know Gary Springfield, who follow my work but don't know him. You can find his website, GarySpringfield.com, and he has a sign up on his newsletter. If you hover over the menu for contact, you can sign up for his newsletter. And he is conducting weekly meditation sessions, lessons, and every Wednesday night. Is that right?
Wednesday night, same time, same channel, 6:00 right here.
Well, we're on my live stream right now, so it's a different channel.
Just send me an email and I'll put you right on the list.
You'll be on the list.
On the list.
I'm so excited to see all of you and the new people too. I can't wait to possibly work with you. Also, if you don't know it, I do soul readings where this voice that you heard tonight actually works with your soul. And those of you who are on here who've experienced my soul readings, maybe you might say a word or two about your experience with those so that when people come back and look at this, watch this video, they can get some idea of what other people have experienced. And you can sign up for those on my website. Right now I have COVID pricing for new clients and returning clients. And that's at godscribe.com, GODSCRIBE.com. Or you can just go to Sandra Sneed as well, sandrasneed.com. I am so excited to see you all and hope to see you again soon. join Gary on Wednesday nights for meditation. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Sandra. Absolutely wonderful. Thank you,
Thank you.
Source.
Thank you.
G-O-D.
G-O-D. G-O-D loves D-O-Gs.
We'll get you a Toto.